Buenas tardes. Me llamo Jinyoung y soy turista aquí en la bella España. Yo no chino o japonés. Yo soy coreana y vivo en Washington, D.C., en los Estados Unidos. Yo estudié español en escuela secundaria, lo siento, solo hablo un poco. Si está bien, voy a seguir en inglés. ¿Está bien? Bien. So whenever I go to another country, I inevitably experience something I call time travel. Typically, I start out in Seattle, Washington, which is one of the tech hubs of the US. And progressively, when I used to live and work in India and Africa, the airports would become less sophisticated. So your airplanes would become older, your kiosks would become older computers, until you finally hit Pemba, Mozambique. And in Pemba, Mozambique, the luggage carrier doesn't even have an x-ray that works. Just put your luggage on the carrier, and it just goes into the building, there's no x-ray, and then boom, you're in Pemba. So, why do I tell this story? When I think about Spain, and when I think about the future of e-commerce in Spain, it reminds me of Africa and India, in that Africa and India, they were able to have a technological advantage because of something called mobile phones. In the rest of the world, we started out with landlines, and they went straight to the mobile phone. And how is that, or why is that? Well, it's because of technology. And so the best known example of leapfrogging is the adoption of mobile phones in the developing world. It's easier, faster, and more effective to put in mobile towers in remote and rural areas than it is landlines. And so what you have today is an explosion of mobile devices around the world. In India alone, 7 years ago, out of 200 million people who own landlines, 150 of them would be cell phones. And so when I think about e-commerce and e-payments, I think about the future in terms of, okay, if Spain wants to continue leading Southern Europe as the leader in e-commerce, then we have to talk about mobile payments, and we have to talk about Bitcoin. According to a recent Forbes magazine, and I actually bought the magazine today, so in a recent Forbes magazine, the topic was about the $15 trillion gold rush. The $15 trillion gold rush. And now what is that? Well, the whole article is about money going mobile. So I'll read you an excerpt today. Money is going mobile, and the race is on to control the flow of bits and cash across 1 billion smartphones and at millions of online and physical locations. Research firm Gartner estimates that mobile payments will top $720 billion a year by 2017, up from $235 billion last year. Humans made $15 trillion worth of retail transactions in 2013. That's why you're seeing major companies like Google, Amazon, Apple, MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal heavily investing millions of dollars into developing a technology in order to be your digital wallet. So we're talking about a future with no credit cards, minimal cash, where you can just simply pay with your mobile phone. Interestingly enough, this same Forbes article that talks about the $15 trillion gold rush mentions Bitcoin. And it says that all these companies that are building millions of dollars into building their own technological platform, it's already been invented, and it's called Bitcoin. First came the internet, then came email, and now Bitcoin has been invented. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in human history, we have figured out how to send money over the internet faster, cheaper, and more securely. What most people don't realize about Bitcoin is that it didn't happen overnight. Bitcoin is a result of over 40 years of research and discovery in a field called cryptography. It solves an age-old problem of how two people who don't know each other can have a trusted transaction over the internet without a third party like Visa or PayPal. Bitcoin achieves this through a distributed network where every transaction is automatically and reliably recorded on a public ledger, so everyone can see every transaction ever made in Bitcoin. And this prevents double spending. Today, if you send a wire transfer from the US, it typically takes 2 to 3 days, and they charge you about $25. Bitcoin enables you to send money to, let's say, your child studying in a different country, or your friend who's traveling internationally without a transfer fee or wait time. Today, credit cards charge 2 to maybe 5% for every single transaction payable by the merchant. And even in fraudulent situations, the merchant, not the credit card company, pays for the losses and penalties. Bitcoin can help increase your bottom line if you're a small business by saving costly transaction fees that credit cards charge you to use their services and empowering you to decide which refunds are legitimate. Lately in America, there's a huge retail store called Target. And Target, Neiman Marcus, and Michaels, they all experienced a credit card data breach where over 40 million people's private information, such as their name, their address, their phone number, and even their mother's maiden name, was stolen. Unlike Bitcoin, credit cards are a pull, not a push transaction. What that means is that whenever you buy something with a credit card, you are giving that store access to all of your private and personal information. Bitcoin, because it's a push transaction, when you make a purchase, you push your money into that designated account and they have no access to your private information. And therefore, you don't have the issue of identity theft and fraud. When I first started in Bitcoin last January, I remember reading about a very small cupcake store in San Francisco, California. Very small. It was a husband and wife operation. I think they were called Cupcakes Bakery, so not even very unique. However, I read about them in Forbes, and I read about them in the Wall Street Journal. It's because they started accepting Bitcoin. And so what we're seeing worldwide is that whenever a business, no matter how small, decides to accept Bitcoin, the whole news world celebrates and writes about that little business. In January of this year, Overstock.com, it's a US-based wholesaler, they became the largest online retailer to accept Bitcoin. In the first day, they received $120,000 worth of transactions in Bitcoin. In March, 3 months after they started accepting Bitcoin, their sales went from $120,000 to $1 million in Bitcoin. Now, what does this mean for us, right? It means that in Spain, one way, anytime that you decide to hop onto a new technology, okay, today, what that means is that early adoption translates to early awards. So not only in reduced transaction fees and time, but also international coverage and consumers. As the world becomes more international and e-commerce becomes increasingly mobile, why wouldn't businesses want to adopt a payment system that was specifically designed for the internet? I'll close with this, and then I'll take some questions. Prior to Bitcoin, I served in a congressional office for a member of Congress and a former member of the Presidential Cabinet Secretary. A lot of people ask me, why would you leave a steady, normal job for Bitcoin? Well, Sheryl Sandberg, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, said that the best career advice she received was from former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. Sandberg had just received an offer with Google to be the new business unit manager. At that time, she was the chief of staff to the then Secretary of Treasury, Larry Summers. And it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that a business unit manager is a much junior position to a chief of staff. She said, Eric, I love Google, but I want to take this job, but there's no business unit to manage, and I don't understand what this job is. And the first thing Eric said to her was, Cheryl, don't be an idiot. To which Cheryl thought, well, that's excellent career advice. But then he continued to say, if you're offered a seat on a rocket ship, get on it. Don't ask what seat. He then told people in their careers, look for growth. Look for teams that are growing quickly, and look for companies that are doing well. Look for a place where you feel that you can have a lot of impact. That year was 2001. Schmidt had just become the CEO of Google, when the company had less than 1,000 employees. And we all know how this ends. She got on that rocket ship, and she became the VP of Global Online Sales and Operations. Today, Google has over 30,000 employees and has grown to be the leading organizer of the world's information. This January, Bitcoin turned 5 years old. It's still very experimental. It's a new technology. Bitcoin itself may or may not succeed, but we're not going to unlearn this technology and system that enables frictionless international transactions faster, cheaper, and more securely. So the question to you is this. Will you and your company or your organization continue to use 20th century methods for transacting? Or will you choose to adopt this 21st century technology to springboard your company's growth and competitiveness into the new digital economy? Muchas gracias y le deseo todo lo mejor. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer anything about Bitcoin or the foundation.
How does it work? I live in Colombia.
Okay.
I want to buy Bitcoins. How does it work?
So if you want to buy Bitcoins, Bitcoin is only 5 years old. What that means is that we need companies like Google and Apple to come to build companies like that. In Colombia, the best way to buy Bitcoin is from someone who owns Bitcoin. So I own Bitcoin. If you have a digital wallet set up on your phone, you can tell me the address of the wallet, I can send you Bitcoin. If you are in Spain,
Bitcoins and I give you pesos.
Yeah, you can give me pesos, US dollars, whatever our agreement is. Yeah. In the US, we have a company called Coinbase. It's a very reliable company. And to buy Bitcoin, you set up an account using your email address, and you connect it to your bank account, and you can buy Bitcoins through that method. In Europe, if you want to buy, well, I guess Spain's part of Europe, but so Bitstamp is a Bitcoin exchange based in Eastern Europe. So if you're in Europe and you want to buy Bitcoin, then you would go to Bitstamp because they're licensed in Europe.
Any cash?
Yes, there are also ATMs. Where? Let's see. Hong Kong has ATMs. Vancouver, Canada. Boston, Massachusetts. There are certain cities around the world. I don't believe there's one here in Spain. I know, it's a shame. Not yet. But if you want to bring a cash teller, Bitcoin teller, here to Spain, talk to me and I'll connect you with some of the Bitcoin companies.
So, how does the government, the Fed, tax Bitcoin?
So the taxing situation, so that's an issue right now as a foundation that we are working with. Because nobody owns Bitcoin, nobody is also responsible for Bitcoin. So the foundation exists to protect Bitcoin against regulatory misdemeanors. In the US, the IRS has classified Bitcoin as a property. However, that's incorrect, right? Because Bitcoin, it's not just property. You can use it as a currency. Some people hold it like an investment, like a stock. Other people are using it just to transact, so as a payment rail. And so we're actually working with the US government in how to define Bitcoin. and how to regulate Bitcoin so as to allow the space to innovate.
Two questions. First, how does the Mt. Gox affect to the Bitcoin credibility? And second, about hacking. I feel that many hackers are attacking against the exchange banks of Bitcoin. Do you think is so?
Okay, so the first question was about Mt. Gox and how has it affected our ecosystem. For those that don't know, Mt. Gox is the largest, or was the largest Bitcoin exchange based out of Japan. Them going bankrupt has actually been one of the best things to happen to the industry. And why is that so? It's because what we're seeing is we're seeing a second wave of entrepreneurs who actually have business experience and who actually understand how to build exchanges, build reliable companies. In the beginning, we had a bunch of like 22-year-old hackers who were like, oh, this is really cool. And they would build a business, they didn't know how to run a business. You know, if you want to run a business, you have to be compliant with laws, correct? Otherwise, the feds come and get you. And so it's actually been really good for the ecosystem because now we're seeing more mature investors and entrepreneurs in this space. Secondly, your question was about
hacking in general.
Hacking in general, right?
The
exchanges, yes. So to that effect, there are two different topics, right? We have Bitcoin the protocol, which has never been hacked. And then we have companies that build on top of the protocol, and some of them have been hacked. Now, the reason why is because they just weren't that secure. And that ties back to, in the beginning, we're only 5 years old. So in the beginning, there were a lot of novice entrepreneurs who didn't understand how to secure their digital wallets or their businesses. Now we're in the second generation of entrepreneurs who know how to secure and protect people's Bitcoins. And then what we'll continue to see are more companies providing security services. Like, I don't have a background in computer science. I do not know how to code to protect my Bitcoin. So I pick the most reliable company that I know, which currently is Coinbase in the US, who is backed by the largest venture capitalists in the United States to protect my Bitcoin.
The good news about Mt. Gox failure is that Bitcoin is still alive, right? The big thing, the good news about the Mt. Gox failure is that Bitcoin didn't die.
Exactly.
Right?
Bitcoin marches on. Yeah. I mean, there has been, especially this year, there's been a lot of ups and downs, like a lot of highs and lows. And Bitcoin, it just marches on. Why? Because the success of Bitcoin doesn't rely on one company. And like I said, companies, I mean, only 1 out of 10 companies ever succeed. Same in the Bitcoin space, right? Because only 1 out of 10 really has the skills, the experience, the money to build a successful company. That's why you don't see 10 Apples. There's only 1 Apple. You don't see 10 Googles. There's 1 Google, right? And so we're seeing the same thing happen in Bitcoin.
Yes, have you seen the experience of a crypto new money that is being launched in Iceland? Did you know about this issue? Can you tell something about them, or is it just a competitor, or?
Yeah, so some people believe and they want Bitcoin to replace like the world's money. That's not going to happen. You know, when credit cards were introduced, like today, my dad doesn't use credit cards. He has cash and checks. I use credit cards. I don't own checks and I don't have cash. And so it just really depends. Bitcoin will become a payment option, but it will never replace all currencies. And so you're seeing countries like Iceland, countries like Canada, developing their own digital currency because it's the faster, cheaper, more secure way to transact. Any more questions? Well, thank you very much for having me.